My name is Paul Shore, and you're watching another edition of The Street Speaks, a spontaneous speaker's corner for Montrealers, where I try to give you and your neighbors a totally unfiltered platform to express yourselves about anything in particular. Nothing is off limits. This week, some Montrealers are debating whether to text or speak to their loved ones. Some are sharing with me the challenges they experience in needing money in order to make money, and others are telling me how they manage their anxiety in complicated modern times. Also ahead, our house band Skinny Bros returns with special guests, and my dear friend, the octogenarian actor, Frederick Smith, takes over the Street Speak soapbox. What's changed? What have you noticed?
I've noticed a lot of things change in my lifetime, you know? I really feel like the kids born in the early 80s were the last group of kids to really get a chance to experience life the way it was.
Look, I can remember my life before computers. I'm old enough to know that. I remember carrying around a box of punch cards, cardboard punch cards, to run computer programs. So you're talking to like an old-time tech nerd here.
Okay. And I think that we, in a sense, had it the best of as it was, not like with music or anything, but we had the most amount of technology while still being kids that played in the street.
The part of my life that I have trouble reimagining is the part of my life which was not constantly accessible.
So we got to experience the change firsthand, and it's given our generation, at the very least, a very interesting viewpoint on what's happened, because, you know, this many years later, you start to say things like, how much longer till kids don't understand why we say roll up the windows, you know, when it's clearly a button.
I'm very aware of that. I worked at the library at UVic, so I'm often helping older people on the computer, and you just realize like how ingrained like computer literacy is in for me personally.
Or don't touch that dial. What dial? What am I dialing? You know what I mean? Why do they even say dial a phone?
When someone's like, can you print this photo? And it's like a web page, and you're just like, I don't really know where to even start. I never occurred that we'd ever want to do that, but.
I'm young enough to have been a part of the problem too. So like, my whole generation is a hypocrite. We helped cause this by being the first people that this way of life was marketed to and by accepting it.
What scares me is the interaction between people. I find nowadays everybody's so obsessed with their own phone that the human eye contact is dissipating. I see a lot of younger generation do not know how to communicate.
The living room is dying. People don't congregate around the TV as a family anymore, you know? They congregate around their own private little devices, and they separate on their own private little devices.
The way they're interacting, the new rapidity with which they're absorbing things, I actually think this is great.
Which takes away that human aspect of things, and I find that's an art, not an art, but something is being dissipated or being taken away, which that to me scares me in some aspects.
And of course there'll be stupidity associated with it. Of course there's going to be bad stuff. There was bad stuff associated with the development of writing. There was bad stuff associated with every human invention.
And again, positives and negatives, because they're always connected, which is a positive, but they're never there with each other, which is definitely a negative. We don't talk anymore.
I've always been taught, or I've always seen my surroundings of people mingling, interacting, and for me, I feed off people. The more I interact with somebody, or I see them face to face, or even that human touch, I find it's a beautiful thing.
I'm so happy to welcome back to the show our house band in Elaine, the brothers Carniello, Skinny Bros, and friends.
I feel is that this generation has a combination of huge energy and massive anxiety, feeling like the world they've been given is worse than the world that their parents had in all kinds of ways.
I spent, up until about 2013, I spent about 2 winters on the streets. I was a heroin addict, and I wound up in an institution. I was away for a while.
Sometimes giving way to despondency, giving way to, there's nothing I can do about it, nothing anybody can do about it.
Clearing my head and becoming less selfish, kind of realized that me trying to change the world around me is largely a waste of energy.
Even sometimes, maybe the world's better off without us. Even that kind of dark thought. Like any teacher, you want to appeal to the better self there, and the better self there is the ability to overcome these challenges.
I have issues with capitalism. I work in a co-op. I have a desire to create and to, contribute something to the world, so I do that. But for me to try and change someone's mind who doesn't want to be changed is completely pointless and futile.
I'm inspired by this generation that'll do it, and I would only ask them not to give way to despondency.
And so in that moment of being clear-headed and kind of changing my own life around, realize that I can change and the world doesn't have to.
Stop worrying and listen within yourself.
That's where I realized that there's no reason for me to constantly try to control my surroundings.
I always come back to that because that's the only thing that always is going to always be there.
Well, one, I cherish that mental attitude, the positive mental outlook. There's crap in the world to be mad about, but if you're trying to be the best person you can be, man, just smile about it.
Stop looking exterior. We have all the answers.
Because not everyone's that conscious. That's okay, but smile, because dude, you have reasons to smile. Everyone has a reason to be grateful.
I'm thrilled to welcome to the Street Speak Soapbox my dear friend, the ageless octogenarian, actor Frederick Smith.
You are not going to believe what I am about to tell you. My name is Solomon, and this is my chronicle. In 1936, I fell asleep in a speakeasy bathroom stall. And when I woke up, it was 2016. Now, stepping out of the stall, I climbed the stairs and engaged this burly barkeep in a confusing yet interesting conversation, as you well might imagine. And it was during this conversation that I glanced at the calendar on the wall and instantly recognized the fact that I had lain in that bathroom stall for, did you do the math? 80 years? Now, it was ludicrous to try and explain this conundrum to this barkeep, who with a nasty grunt gave me the bum's rush and tossed me out into the street. Getting to my feet, I put on my old fedora, and that's when I got the first look around. Squinting didn't help because it didn't change the overwhelming changes between squints. The automobiles, the airplanes, the people, the high-rising monstrosities, and men not wearing hats. How was I going to survive in this strange new world? I knew that if the corrupt politics was still in place, I was going to need some dough. But I also recognized the fact that my former craft was moribund. So I was reduced to panhandling, but with a little difference. I got myself to a busy street corner, took my mouth organ out, clapped it in my hand like that, and made sounds for dinner. Things were looking up. Dinner was dropping into my hat. Maybe it was because I was disturbing the peace. When suddenly, out of nowhere, shows up this other muscled wanker claiming his territory. Well, between punches, I managed to ask a couple of questions like, is the depression over? No, he said. Do we still have a prime minister? We do, he said. Going down after the last punch, I managed to quickly clap my hat on my head and saved dinner. Now, how am I going to survive in this environment? Getting to my feet, I realized that my old mouth organ was going to be pretty inadequate. So, I found the brewery mission. And they gave me enough time to think about my next or any move I wanted to make. So, I turned loose in the street and wandered with a special attention to what was happening around me in this new world. And what was happening and what had transpired was the electronic world. And this world was rushing headlong down a path that spelt utter disaster. But it was not the fault of electronics.
I recognize that we are isolated, and more. My brother was in medical school, and about 20 years ago he was in medical school. His first year psychiatry teacher told them that the next major public health issue was going to be social isolation. And unfortunately, he was right.
In public spaces?
Spaces, yeah?
Yes, sure. You see people, in restaurants, you see a couple not talking to each other, each one of them on their phones, it's like ridiculous.
It's good because, you can message your girlfriend on Facebook or whatever, but I mean, it's so impersonal. Sometimes you'll be having dinner and, let me check my final grade, let me check, and, her as well, let me check if whatever my boss wrote to me, and yeah, it becomes very impersonal. Right?
Well, or you see a bunch of teenagers or, youngsters that are all of them together, but all of them on their smartphones, and they're either checking things, together or texting each other while they're in front of each other. It's really, really hilarious.
When I see people in a restaurant and they've gone presumably out on a date, I don't know if they're brother and sister, or if they're boyfriend, girlfriend, married, whatever, and they're both sitting on phones, I'm actually kind of appalled. It's like, okay.
Whether it's through our phones or just the way that partly because we're afraid of being vulnerable, and we like having the comfort of texting and having that space of, I'm going to write exactly what I think is okay, and I'm going to pass it around to my friends to say, do you think this text is the right text to send in response to this person? So it's easier to interact with people. I know people who sit next to each other and text to each other rather than talk.
Can't you put that cell phone away for a few minutes so that you can have a quality conversation?
Communication goes a lot through texting, and sometimes we say, I think in a couple relationship, I think it changed. With my friends, it's very, very fast. Hey, let's meet there. Very useful.
Oh, it becomes an addiction. It becomes an addiction. I think that people these days, their listening power is decreasing, because I meet people, they're talking to me, and at the same time they're texting me, or I'm in the middle of a deep conversation or some important conversation, and suddenly my son leaps up because he has an email or a text message coming in.
But in a couple, fights through texting or argument through texting, it's like you can express a lot by reading yourself after what you wrote, and then, oh no, I'm not gonna say this.
I think what we've seen with the advent of IMing and Facebook and all of that is actually we've seen cyberbullying, because part of the reason is because you're not getting the instant feedback, the visual, the non-verbal cues, and even on all the visual cues that you get when you're interacting with someone and you're hurting their feelings, you don't get it online. But you don't actually know how it's affecting the person on the other side. They're not in front of you.
There's no accountability either.
No,
you can run
there's
away.
no accountability. Exactly.
it's not that impulsive, not that real. And sometimes you get to think like, do I really mean this? These are just beautiful words being said to me, or is it really real? Because once I'm in front of that person can't express the same words anymore.
Human connection, we're missing out on that for the reasons that we are exchanging lots of these text messages and so on. I mean, it's so easy, it's so cheap, it costs nothing, but nothing comes out of nothing.
Solomon here, from the past. Fell asleep in a barroom stall, woke up 80 years later, and this is my chronicle. After being physically attacked by this threadbare beggar like myself, I sat on a park bench, took in my surroundings, and gathered information about present time. Everyone hustling by seemed to be talking to themselves, with little boxes clapped upside their heads. Funny and strange, because it reminded me of Dick Tracy talking into his wristwatch. I decided to engage this pretty skirt, who was also chattering away on one of these devices. Madam, I said, please, tell me, why is everybody talking into these devices? She stopped, looked at me, and said, are you for real? I said, I'm from 1936. Oh, she said, chuckling, like Rip Van Winkle. Exactly, I said. And then, with that, she delved into her bag and gave me one of these devices. Oh, and also, this card. It's for business. We smiled at each other, and she went on her way.
Because of the way the economic structure is right now, I find that Montreal is getting caught up in a lot of the negative aspects of monetary gains.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox. I don't know if that's the right word. Time is money, but you're wasting time, but you're saving money. I do think we've become so focused. We're a money-driven society. Could I save this cost? Could I save that?
Because there's too much, because of the way the world is, you know, it's all about economics, but we forget to respect each other.
It's like colors, you know, there's like black and then there's white and then there's a gray zone, but it doesn't change the fact that the general tendency of bosses is that they exploit people.
You know, could I cut this person to save a cost? And that is a bit the beauty of machines, if you're an entrepreneur, that you could save those costs. But, and I've spoken to a lot of people, you're wasting the time. So it's always a battle within the company, I mean.
Like, yes, you can say that small and medium businesses are less worse or more good, but it's all the same thing to me. It's like, if the workers don't get what they work for, they're being robbed in some way.
So I think 30, 40 years ago, they were less cost-driven. I mean, you're always careful, but they wanted to provide the client with a service. You know, they wanted the best of the best, and now they just want to save costs, and the client comes secondary, unfortunately.
Walk on the Saint Denis Street or Saint Laurent Street and see how many shops it's closed. Just this. Just see that. and for the people too, because when you walk and you see everything is closed, you don't want to come again.
Where we could go, that's always the catch. You have debt, how are you going to cut taxes? But if you don't cut taxes, you know, the debt, I feel like, will keep going up. You need somehow to manage it or to cut it.
If you take into account the things that the state has as companies like
Crown corporations, like
SAQ, Hydro, Gas
Yeah.
Metro, then the state of Quebec is actually the less in debt of all provinces of Canada.
There's always a certain amount of debt in business and everything, but we do need to bring the debt down. We don't want to be like you know, the US, where it's gotten to a point that it's very hard to bring it back down, and you don't want to keep borrowing, and it's just a never-ending circle.
So like debt is not a major concern, and I don't think austerity is something that's going to reduce the debt. We've seen what happened in Greece. You were talking about debt. I think what erases debt is creating wealth, and creating wealth comes by giving wealth to the majority so that they can, you know, upgrade their standard of life and then spend more money and then make the wheel turn. Because if you cut into the conditions of living of the people, they spend less money, the economy crashes.
Solomon here, teleported from 1936 after falling asleep in the bathroom stall. These are my chronicles. After accruing one of these fine devices, I studied a new online economic theory and prepared a TED Talk. To demonstrate the theory, I would need a company whose goal was not to satisfy shareholders' avaricious expectations of quarterly growth. I would rather employ lateral market activity and spread real value among communities. Remember, money is like horse manure. It doesn't do anybody any good unless you spread it around. With this new information, there'd be no limitations on what we could accomplish. You don't suppose there's a button I could push on this thing that would send me back to 1936?
At start, the margin between what a worker produces and what he can buy back, to fit that gap, the banks created credit, okay? So banks are like a tool to make capitalism look not so bad, because here, look, we have credit cards, okay?
I find it absolutely insane. That's one thing people have to, this is the parents who have to, me, I appreciated money so much. When you earn it, trust me, you appreciate it way more. I always had money. My parents did not have money. They had what we needed, but never more, never for the little extras, the little pluses. But it didn't bother us, so okay, fine.
But here's the thing, the depth of most people is increasing, and the banks keep making more money of interest. It's not more money that's being worked for, it's money that's being manipulated in building towers.
One day I asked my father, I needed new shoes. So my father gave me a bill. He says, here. I said, Dad, I can't get for this month. So his daddy said, yes, you can. Look at this. I bought it. It's right here. I went to work at night at a printing press, schlepped materials from the basements for people up to the third, fourth floor, no elevator. And I had my money for the beautiful shoes that cost 3 times what my father gave me. So when you earned it, trust me, I had those shoes for 10 years.
You don't have to get a credit card. You don't have to have credit.
You don't have to have a credit card. Try to go get a cell. Try to go get a contract for a cell phone. They ask credit card obligatory. Try to get a passport. They ask for a credit card. Try to buy something on the internet. They ask for a credit card.
Okay, you're right. You're right. Okay. Hey, people are.
They don't appreciate anything. Anything it's coming to you. But no, it's not coming to you. Earn it first, then get it. Then you see how much you appreciate it. If you earn it, You can't say anything against them because they earned it. But the kids today, the young kids, they want everything, doing nothing. That's not right. I don't think that's right.
No one's forcing you to spend money you don't have, right?
No one is forcing you, but social interactions, social pressure does exist.
It's not right for them. It's not that it's bad. It's a question of appreciation. When I left Hungary at age 22, I knew how to cook. I knew how to behave. I knew how to talk. Basic and elementary thing. You show me a kid like that today.
When you see everybody spending nice time, enjoying nice food, enjoying nice drinks, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, doing the party, you want to do the same. So it's not fair for some people to have a nice life with lots of enjoyment and other people to be stuck in a circle of poverty, because you need money to make money.
That wraps up yet another edition of The Street Speaks. A very special thank you to the Montrealers who shared their voices with me this past week. Also, thank you to our house band Skinny Bros and to the ageless wonder, Montreal actor Frederick Smith, who owned our soapbox. Join me next week as some Montrealers celebrate the multiculturalism that makes our city so unique. Some immigrants share their stories and the challenges of integration, and others tell me how the healthcare cuts have affected them. Also, comic Emma Wilkie, storyteller Nisha Coleman, and comic improviser Sehar Manji all take to the Street Speak soapbox. If you want to get in touch with me, don't be shy. I can be reached on Twitter and on Facebook. See you next time.
My name is David Black, and you're watching The Street Speaks.